in the middle. What am I singing?
What's up? How are you? All right, I was just going, am I tall enough? Because my shirt says happy. I love the shirt.
Mardi Gras parade.
What? All right, guys, so the question is, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? Gut instinct. You're all like, well, happy, duh. Of course, I'd rather be happy. Wrong.
Well, I wouldn't say wrong, but are you actually allowing that to? Is that true for you? Hi, Mr. Jared.
I am. Yeah, most of the time. We'll talk about this, but so answers below. Jared, what do you think? Would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? Drop us a comment.
You done talking?
No.
What we're talking about, you guys, is, I think it kind of corresponds with a lot of the relationship stuff that we were talking about over the last week, but I think we're also seeing that play out for us right now, or seeing it play out for people in different avenues right now for what we're going through, right? And what we oftentimes see with clients, even ourselves, is I have to have the answer to this. I have to be right. I have to know the information. I have to make sure everyone else knows that I know the information, right? Like, well, I'm not going to budge on this topic because I know I'm absolutely right. So I'm going to make sure my spouse, my significant other, the people I work with have to bow down to me and admit that I'm the all-knowing person before that they tell me that I'm okay. Where instead of like looking at the scenario of like, well, does it really matter? Right? Like, does it really matter in the long run? Right? Like, does it, yet again, like how many times have you been in an argument with your significant other or a feud with a friend or a colleague or whatever? And it's like, no, I'm right by this, damn it. Like, I'm not budging on this. And it's like, well, yet again, what is that costing you? Right? Like more times than not, from my experience, from my own experience, is usually when I'm budging on there is usually that's my need for certainty, right? Like when we're really talking about, it's like, that's my need for certainty of like, no, I know all, I'm not giving in to this. And when it really comes down to it, it probably doesn't even matter in the long run if you just say, okay, that's fine with you, right? And it, like, you do you, I'll do me, that's okay. Like, that still doesn't mean that we can't appreciate each other, we can't love each other, we can't do anything that isn't going to cause any more rifts and feuds over this in the long run. But I think a lot of it is, for if your need for certainty is one of the higher needs on there, what is that costing you in relationships? And especially, what is that costing you right now?
Yeah, and we're just seeing a lot of, I think that the last few days there's been like a lot of sort of unrest and emotional like imbalance again, because it was like, we got shut down and then we knew we had till this date, right? And so everybody sort of, I feel like, settled in and was like, okay, this is what I know to be true for this time, right? And not everyone, like there's definitely been some unrest and some like, again, I'm going to go out and I'm going to research whatever camp you're in, right? The camp that this is real, the camp that this is a conspiracy, the camp that whatever, but like, there's been this thing of sort of settled in, right? And then all of a sudden we had this, okay, it's over on this date and the world gets to start opening back up, right? And so then, from this level it says, yes, we can open. And then this level says, well, maybe kind of. And then the actual level that has control of us says, no, just kidding. It's another couple weeks, right? And so I feel like everyone right now is in this sort of turmoil again of, okay, I thought I had some certainty. I thought I knew where life was going. I thought I whatever. And now all of a sudden we don't know again, right? And so what we want to talk about is we often think like we just want to be happy. And we talked about this yesterday, right? Like I just want to be happy, right? But so often we really would rather be right. And so if you look at this, at your habits in the past, right? Because often it's easier to look back and analyze where you've been and not where you are right now. It's a lot harder to see what's happening right now in this moment until you really spend some time in this work. But if you can look back and go, oh, right? Like we hear it all the time from people when we used to like do diet plans, because we did that for the gym, right? Like, don't love it. Sad that we did it, but not sad because it was a learning experience. But like when we would do that, people would come in there, they'd be like, well, I've never been able to stick to any diet before in my life, or I've never been able to commit to coming to the gym, and I've never done this, right? And their need to be right, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, 6 weeks later, whatever it was, they had stopped doing the thing, right? And they're like, see, I told you, I can't ever do this. I always fail at this, right? And so what honestly happens in a lot of those scenarios, you guys, there's lots of things that go on, but it's that like, I need to be right. I need to prove that I'm right and that I'm still that I'm still in my story and I'm still in this. And we don't even realize that need to be right and that safety of being right and that safety of things always being the way that they were doesn't allow us to actually find happiness, right? Because happiness is outside of your comfort zone. Happiness is where growth happens, and then happiness happens. So it's really starting to look at, like, go look back in your past at things that like keep showing up for you, right? Were you actually trying to be happy, or were you trying to be right? And then go, oh, well, I wonder why I was doing that. And like, again, we talked about Bitfar, like, you know that feeling. You know the feeling of being right. Maybe you don't yet know the feeling of being happy. So you're always going to go back to the emotion that you know what that feeling feels like.
Well, and I think it's also on the side of understanding that the thinker thinks and the finder finds, right? And so what we think about, our brain's job is to go out and seek and prove that we are correct in that, right? And so a lot of it is also, what are the questions? What are the things that, what is that thing?
On point. Yes.
I wasn't expecting that. But what are you constantly putting out there? Because I think the part that, for me, and I wouldn't say it's, maybe it is triggering me a little bit on the side, because it's hard for me to kind of understand why we tend to put ourselves in such a turmoil spin cycle on a certain scenario that we don't have any control over, right? But it's the constant, like, well, this doctor's saying this person's saying this, it's all these big, and yet again, I'm not here to tell you what to think, what is right or wrong. All I know is there are people legitimately dying from this thing, right? And like, the people that are higher up hopefully do have the better outlook to making sure that they're trying to give us the best information so that we don't run into big problems here. But at the same time, that's not for me to worry about, right? Like, that's me getting outside my own business of the things in which I can control right now in this moment. And that's how I react, how I respond, how I think, how I feel. Like, all these things within my control is my business. And when I start getting outside my business, you guys, that's me trying to prove and control outside areas that aren't mine to even control. Right? Like, so what oftentimes happens is when we're talking about being right, you're not in your business. You're trying to influence somebody else to come on your tribe and come into your business and show that, oh, you know what? You are absolutely right. You're genius. You're phenomenal. You're all these things. Perhaps that's true, but does it really matter?
Well, it's funny. So we're going to talk to you guys about how we would have been 3 years ago. So this was interesting because we've had this conversation. So just now Brandon said, I don't understand that. So,
but that's me getting outside my business.
Right. But 3 years ago, when our business got sold and we had no certainty, and if this has been presented to us at this point, how would you be responding, do you think?
Oh, I would have been creating more problems.
Right.
I would absolutely be creating more problems. I honestly, my thing was, in order for me to feel productive, is I would go build something, I would tear something down, I would remodel the gym, I would do anything I could to make me feel like I had a sense of control by creating a problem that I knew I could solve.
Right. And here's the other thing, you guys, and this is a world we lived in where, like, I actually only felt I could be productive in chaos. Right? Like, and he and I would both do this, and I would watch him do it, and I'd be like, why does he do that? And then I'd look finally in the mirror, I'm like, oh, I do that too. Like, I would create chaos and be like, oh my gosh, I gotta get all this stuff done, because like, I felt like, I was a procrastinator always, and so I felt like if I waited till the last minute, I created that fear and that like scared feeling that I would get stuff done. So I would create chaos in my life and like pile all these things on my plate that didn't have to be done that day, just so that I felt like I could be productive. And so what I see right now, and a lot of people, is that like, if we're used to functioning in sort of this like chaotic, it's actually stuckness, but it's like, this is my productive chaos. This is what I need. This is just what I know, right? We're trying to create certainty that we're doing that to ourselves. And I can tell you guys, 3 years ago, before we started doing this work, we would be a mess right now. Like, we would be looking for all the things. We would be focused on like what we could control. And we were talking about this yesterday.
We'd be burnt out too.
We'd be burnt out. He would have been like, I guarantee you guys, he would have been in the gym like every day, probably working on it, and then working out for 2 to 3 hours. I would have been counting every macro to the last bit. I would have been like, I'm going to do like the hard whatever. I'm going to be as strict as possible on my diet, because what I needed was certainty, and that's what nutrition and like holding on to my macros would have done for me. And he would have gone to the gym and been like, okay, this is my place, this is my safety zone. What can I do to be here?
Well,
right?
Like, honestly, and you see that going around, right? Like, I need this hard challenge right now. This is a time for me to go big and go hard and go all these kind of things, right? It was like, we have to choose the hard scenario to go through to show that we're tough and that we can manage ourselves to do this, right? Like, we need to create integrity with ourselves by going super hard, super strict, doing all the things. I mean, like, we live that. I mean, that was our
a long
mentality.
time.
That was our philosophy, right? Like, well, if you slip up a little bit, maybe you don't really want it, right? Like maybe you don't have enough willpower. Maybe you're not really dedicated to the things you really want, right? And it's like, well, no, that's not true at all. And honestly, like from our stance is like the last thing people need right now is piling on more hard shit. Like this has already brought about its own level of uncertainty, its own level of things that we've never had to cross. We're having a lot of our lively aspects influenced, right? Like we're wearing a ton of hats. And at the same time, usually when we're getting outside ourselves of having to take on more and more sense of control, like we're seeing that with people in their nourishment, they're seeing that with their diets, they're seeing that with exercise, they're seeing that with their significant other, they're seeing with all these kind of things, is because we're trying to get outside of ourselves to control a scenario that we can't control right now. And so it's bringing about that sense of, well, I have to be right. I have to be certain. Otherwise, that means I'm not going to be happy.
And so I think right now, we were talking about this earlier, is there's two things right now. Is our certainty about what the world looks like is gone. We don't know. Nobody knows. So that thing that we thought we had, like, this is my life, this is how it goes. I go to a job, I can go to the store. All of the things that like we took for granted, aka to step back and see what you're grateful for, like that certainty is gone, right? But then, so for a lot of people, we're trying to figure out like, how do we create that need for certainty? A lot of us are doing it by trying to control things, right? But remember, control is your need for certainty, but it's usually in a way that doesn't align with the best version of yourself, right? So take a step back and say, what are 3 things that I can create in my life today? Just today. What are 3 things I can create? What are 3 emotions I can create? What are 3 things that I can do that get me toward closer to where I want to be? What are 3 practices? To me, it's like, get up, spend 10 minutes doing some breath work, take a couple breaks in the middle of the day, right? It's super simple, but what can you create in your life right now? Okay, when you start to create that inner calm, it doesn't matter when the world opens up. None of that will matter as much, right? But then the other side of that is that the uncertainty, the variety that a lot of us had, right? What is variety? Well, I want to go out to eat. I want to be able to go shop. I want to be able to go to the park. I want to be able to do whatever, right? A lot of the ways we were meeting our need for uncertainty, which is through activity, and for very many people, it's food. Now that's gone, right? Well, I can't go to my restaurant. I can't do this, right? Like I felt this weekend, right? We've been pretty like calm, and we haven't eaten out, and it's been pretty flowy most times. But Friday I was like, I want Chipotle. So we got Chipotle. And Saturday I was like, I really want sushi. And I was like, wow. And then I wanted to buy Carson some tennis shoes yesterday, and I couldn't go to the store. And I was like, oh, I need to figure out something for my need for variety. Cause clearly like I was running into roadblocks of like, okay, now I just want to be able to do this. Right. And so start to look at how can you create variety in your day, and how can you create calm in your body and in your feelings so that those 2 things won't feel so chaotic. Right. Because we need certainty, we need uncertainty, and if the ways that you are meeting them are gone and you can't shift them right now, you've got to look inward and go, okay, what are new ways that are in alignment with how I want to feel and how I want to show up that will actually meet those needs, right? So if that doesn't make sense, go back 4 weeks. It was like episode 3. They don't even say episodes at that point, but go back. It was a Wednesday, the very first week we got shut down. So it was like the 18th of March. We did an hour-and-a-half thing on the 6 human needs. If you have not watched that, and this, you're like, wow, what does that mean? What does certainty mean? What does uncertainty mean? Go back and watch that. It is so worth it, and it will start to change everything. And then you can start to go, oh, that's why I feel this way. That's why I'm acting that way. That's why I'm saying these things, right? So when you can really understand that, again, always look inward. You cannot change what's going on outside of you, but you can turn inward. You can heal those things. You can look at them. You can shine light on them. And through that, you can heal. You can create happiness right now, right? The world doesn't have to open up. You don't have to be able to go to Starbucks every time you want for you to find happiness, right? It's within you, and you have that power.
Well, and with that, you guys, it's, I think, also looking at the stance of what needs to happen, or what has to happen for you to experience happiness, right? Like, yet again, if you have to experience it, and if what needs to happen is you being right, your significant other doing exactly what you think at the moment in which they should do it, always agreeing with you, right? Like your kids should always sit down, do their homework, never argue, never have a second thought, sit down for lunch, when you ask it, right? Like, is your reality of what your expectations not aligning with what reality is, right? Because usually when it's like, I have to be right versus happy, is because your expectations aren't really aligning with what reality is, right? We try to control reality. Trying to control reality is kind of like trying to control gravity, right? Like it's always going to be there, right? And so if I'm trying to expect her to do certain things and read my mind, and I'm trying to expect my kids, 4 and 6, that they should be super obedient, they should always wash their hands, they should never touch their mouth, they should always not play with the dog, right? Like if that's not my scenario, I'm going to be in a world of hurt, not to mention adding on a big scoop of uncertainty with this whole thing going on top of that, right? And so a lot of this, you guys, is yet again, just analyzing, really look at and ask yourself, what has to happen? And just really being honest of like, holy shit, like my reality versus my expectation is like zilch as far as alignment. And what do I need to do is instead, maybe I need to really expand my expectations and really see what I can do, because reality is reality. You're not going to change that. And so by being honest and being open to it and what we said the other day, and surrendering to it, right? Like, and not in a sense of like you're being weak, but on a sense of like, well, what's more important to you, fighting with reality or being happy, right? Because really that's all it is allowing yourself to surrender to what's happening, see how you can go about do it. It's your reaction that you can control, right? It's what things mean to you. If they're not meaning what is really going on, perhaps you need to change your perception of what's going on. And at the same time, how can you adjust that so you can experience happiness?
Yeah, and I mean, just a last thing, you guys, we know that like expectation and comparison are the death of all happiness. Right? Like if you have these expectations of yourself, of your life, of your whatever, like they're going to kill your happiness, right? And so it's like, I want you guys to have intention, and we want you to have goals, and we want you to be striving to those things from inspired action. But when you're like, this is the expectation, and if I don't hit it, I'm a failure. I did that for 99% of my life, right? And so I always felt, we're both double negatives right now, I never felt good enough. Hi, Audra. Like I never felt good enough because I was always going for this perfection, right? I was going for this thing that I could never really reach. So like set aligned goals without expectation and without timelines, right? Like maybe you're not going to get there in the time that you thought you could get there, but you can choose right now to be happy. You can choose right now that feeling. So let go of comparison, let go of expectation, and choose to be happy. And if you don't know what happiness feels like, think back to a time in your life where you just really felt joy and be like, wow, when was the last time I felt that? And how could I create that for myself right now in this moment? And when you show up from that energy, all of the other stuff is going to show up for you, right? You won't have to chase, you won't have to hustle for it.
Well, and I think tomorrow we should talk about being present, because yet again, if you're not enjoying, if you can't be present, you can't be happy right now. Right? Like that had, like, if you can't be genuinely happy, that's probably mean because you're not being present in the moment of what's going on. But I also, because I've seen it probably floating through Facebook a lot more today, of just on the sense of like, I'm doing this hardcore challenge, I'm doing this next like 120-day challenge of no slip ups, no anything else. There's already a massive amount of uncertainty, right? Like we're having to wear, if you're a parent, like we're already having to wear a ton of hats on there, right? Like if you're working from home, you're probably having to shift your lifestyle around a little bit. And if you're jumping on board some massive, strict, all in, you got to go hard or go home challenge on there. And then because the reason why I'm talking this, because we did this for years of, well, if I have to follow these rules and these restrictions of like eating 5 times a day exactly at this meal time and measuring and doing all these kind of things and working out twice a day and getting up at 5 o'clock and going, if all of a sudden your kids have something come up, all of a sudden you're having to take more time into teaching them something, all of a sudden you have a deadline for work that comes up, all of a sudden you have something that the world brings about you that you're unexpecting, how are you going to feel when all of a sudden you're not able to meet the challenge standards or the rules in which that challenge is placing upon you? And in addition, once you feel those things, what is your response going to be? I would imagine you're probably going to punish the shit out of yourself because you're going to feel like you failed. You're going to probably lead into a self-sabotage because it's going to conflict with the reality of the scenario, and it's going to conflict with your values that we've talked about, I think 10 episodes ago. And it's also not going to align with where the direction that you want to go in, because right now that's a way of you controlling the scenario in a moment that we don't feel control in, right? And so it's looking at the broader perspective of what we do on a day-to-day basis and allowing yourself, yet again, how do you stack the deck in your favor to experience happiness? Because if you experience happiness and joy for yourself and you can be present in this moment, I guarantee the other people around you, they are already probably feeling overwhelmed, despair, uncertain, itchiness under the skin. If you could be the light for yourself, you're probably also going to be the light for the other people around you, right? Like it's not creating more rules and restrictions for your kids, for your family, for your spouse. It's you leading the way by creating certainty within yourself and joy within yourself because you are understanding who you are.
Yeah. And I think honestly, like every day get up and say, what would it feel like if today was easy? What can I do to make it feel like today is easy, right? Like shift that. I mean, I literally get triggered by the word hustle now because we did it for so long. And every day I'm like, well, what would it feel like to feel like the best version of myself? And what would it feel like for this to be easy? And then I live into that energy. And when you guys do that, this whole thing is just going to feel like it actually flew by and like you're going to be happier on the other end of it. So we love you guys. We appreciate you guys. Anything else? All right, we'll be back tomorrow, episode, I don't know, 42. I don't know if we have a theme this week, but we're going to kind of keep just talking about happiness and how to move more towards
I think
that.
presents would be a good one.
Yeah.
Think presents be a good one, y'all?
Presents it is. All right, that means he's bringing me things. No, I'm just kidding. All right, guys, thanks so much. Hope you're having a great Monday, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you, everyone.